My face was refreshed by the cold evening air as I sat on the balcony in a nice blanket. The sun was gently setting, creating a golden trail on the lake. Near me, a cup of green tea was gently boiling and scented with jasmine. Andrew moved in with me after his parents' horrible divorce. He looked older at 18. His eyes were sad and exhausted, as if he had seen too much for his age. I hadn't seen him so reflective in a while. He was great today. He was calm, and I felt he needed time to process things. He called Aunt Evelyn softly as he entered the patio. He was shifting uncomfortably in the doorway when I looked up. "Can I help you?"
I grinned.
Feeling his offer was more than polite. "Yes, you can. Help me with the garden? Roses need additional care. They've been picky this year." Andrew smiled, and his eyes sparkled. We went to the garden with equipment. We worked together, and I remembered his summer vacations. With us as kids. Short-clad Andrew runs about the garden with muddy hands. Smiled at me with each memory. Remember falling into the pond to catch a frog. Remembering him and those funny moments that seemed so important, I laughed. How could I forget? He smiled as you jumped in to help me instantly, only to fall into the water. His eyes twinkled with childlike joy. We laughed, and I felt a warm, almost familial bond again. The twilight caressed us softly. Its coolness, and I saw that this time had become an oasis amid the mental storm we had been enduring in previous months. After tidying up the garden, we enjoyed the sunset and silence on the terrace. Andrew was staring at me just as I thought the day was done. He seemed mysterious and new, like he was trying to understand something. A little nervous. Choose not to focus. Andrew suddenly approached me. Indeed, he started quietly. "I've always known you were different. No one understood me better than you." I stopped as a warm feeling rose inside. "Andrew, you always were. Priceless to me, you know that I say gently." His gaze never left me. I noticed his eyes deepen. As if he decided internally, he leant forward and kissed my lips instead of talking. My heart stopped in a flash. I stepped away, ashamed and shocked, as a warm wave filled my face. I didn't want to disrupt the uncomfortable stillness. He whispered, "I'm sorry," pained and confused. Unsure why I did that. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. I replied that it was okay, but my mind were racing. Wind-blown autumn foliage. "Forget it, okay?" He nodded, but his gaze was almost analytical. Something strange crept into my heart as I tried to smile. I got up early the next day. I wanted to forget last night. I heard dishes clattering in the kitchen and realized Andrew was up. I wanted to postpone meeting him to think things through, but hiding in a little place was hard. I approached the kitchen with boldness, trying to appear cool. Andrew fried eggs at the stove. He seemed focused, yet he glanced at me. His countenance showed worry and expectation. "Good morning," he muttered too sweetly to reduce stress. I said, "Good morning," trying to sound nonchalant. "Both of us for breakfast." So he grinned, but with a hint of a darkness. I sensed an uneasy silence while we ate breakfast. I knew I couldn't ignore what happened, but I was unprepared to mention it. Finally, I felt we needed to alleviate some strain. "Andrew," I said, attempting to seem confident. "Could you help me with the old shed? I can't solve it alone." "Okay, why not?" he replied, clearly enjoying the distraction. Our next stop was the old shed with garden tools and wooden crates. I turned on the lights, and the dusty chamber was illuminated by gentle golden light. We sorted tools, moved boxes, and decided what to keep and what to throw away. I felt tension rising with each minute in that tight space. He seemed too close and tactile. He stared at me as I hid in a shelf attempting to focus. "You cannot ignore what happened." He spoke calmly, showing humiliation and determination. My heart raced as I froze. "Andrew, I'm not sure we should be talking about this," I responded, trying to seem casual, but a storm was coming. Brewing. His voice grew as he approached. "No, we must, because I think something important happened, and you know it." I backed off, unsure what to say. He was forthright, but his words moved me. I felt his hand on mine then. I quickly turned to face him and noticed his profound, unburied emotions in his eyes. I muttered, "Andrew, don't," but he approached. Everything seemed to dissolve when I felt his breath on my skin. I was kissed again like he couldn't stop. Unlike the other kiss, this one was persistent and yearning for a response. After a moment I stepped back, my mind spinning. "No, this is wrong," I said, moving back yet unable to look away from him. I wasn't sure what to do or say. Everything felt complicated, dangerous. Andrew blushed and left immediately. "Sorry, but I'm confused." His voice shook and I knew he was confused. I breathed deeply to find the right words. "We must set limits, Andrew. What's happening might hurt us both," I said softly, trying to calm him and myself. He nodded, but his expression showed disagreement. "Just let me figure this out," he grumbled. And I realized this conversation would continue like a wave battering the coast. We came home in calm, each thinking. I knew one thing. This was just the start, and we would both change. I tried to forget what happened in the days that followed. I stuck to routine and saw friends. I did chores and tended the garden. But every time I saw Andrew, I felt uneasy, and it was getting harder to ignore. I saw him avoiding conversation and eye contact. This made cohabitation strange and frightening. I thought we needed to break the awkward cycle and do something different. "Andrew," I casually said at breakfast, "how about we go to the neighboring town's farmer's market today? Stroll and buy fresh produce. It may help us relax." He nodded after staring at me, shocked. "Why not?" His speech was firm, but his eyes showed gratitude. He may have seen this as an attempt to ease the almost unbearable stress. We took a small route through meadows and woods to the nearby town. The car filled with music when I turned on the radio to break the solitude. We mentioned the weather and how long it had been since our last market trip, but everything felt forced and unpleasant. The market smelled of fresh fruit, pastries, flowers. We explored the stalls. Even though I attempted to be nice, I felt his presence, too close and tangible. We bought cheese, bread, apples. Though everything seemed normal, I sensed something strange and mysterious. Andrew stopped and pointed at the glass as we passed an antique shop. He said, "Evelyn, look," with remarkable enthusiasm. I turned to see his point an ancient music box with tarnished gold and ceramic components. My breath caught briefly. I started, but my voice shook. Unable to look away from the box, I said, "It looks like my grandmother's." "It does." Andrew approached, touching fingertips. "The window glass. You said it was precious." I nodded. My skin is chilling. It was her jewelry box. She kept old letters and photos there. Andrew remained mute, but I noticed he was watching me intently, as if wondering why this was so essential. "You want to go inside?" he asked gently. As we entered the antique shop, I nodded. It was dark and dusty inside. A shelf held the box and other abandoned objects. I opened it softly with my hands. An ancient dried rose and yellowed inscriptions were within. Andrew changed his expression as he reviewed the letters. "May I look?" he asked cautiously. He looked over the letters I gave him. "Serious expression," he said, maybe surprised by his finding that our family is special. "Several pre-birth controversies." I felt a surge of anxiety. I added, "I had no idea these letters still existed," wanting to take them from him. He continued reading, and his expression clouded. "Evelyn, why didn't you inform me about those incidents?" His speech was calm, yet I could see he was nervous. "Dinner conversation does not include this." I tried to joke, but I heard my voice trembling. "Andrew, certain things are best forgotten." The man nodded but didn't appear convinced. Perhaps he replied quietly, "I'm realizing our family has more secrets than it seems." My chest got cold from the letters, the antique music box, and our stress. It all created a confusing and troubling picture. Image. I didn't know what to do, but I could feel the situation was sliding away. I realized after leaving the shop that our trip to the market had not lessened the stress. It made it more real and scary. We returned from the market silently, thinking. The archaic letters and odd music box made us more uncomfortable. An invisible weight pressed heavier on my shoulders. Andrew also appeared. He seemed serious, periodically looking out the window as if to address some inner questions. For stress relief, I suggested we walk to the lake and have a picnic. I always felt comfortable and peaceful besides the water. We may get balance by walking, I thought. We walked through thick trees on a winding path. We reached the ancient wooden dock. Andrew immediately suggested we swim like he did as a child. "Please, the water is warm." His smile turned brilliant and urgent as he yelled. I laughed as he dove into the lake, splashing 1,000 times. He seemed fresh and energetic. I felt older and more vulnerable immediately. Water, sun, and laughter. It seemed like a scene from a simpler, clearer time. Andrew swam back to shore, hair saturated, water drops dripping down his face, and I couldn't look away. He chuckled, approached, and doused me with water. I gasped and laughed. I felt him move closer then. I heard his heartbeat speeding up close. He stared at me carefully, attempting to understand me. "You know, Evelyn," he added gently but confidently. "I've always valued you more than an aunt. Can't hide it anymore." Unsure what to say, I froze. His statement seemed dangerous, like he breached a line I was drawing. I panicked. "Andrew, you don't understand what you're saying," I said. He aggressively responded, "No, I do," moving towards me. "Maybe you're hesitant to confess it." Before I could speak, he kissed me again. But this kiss was different. It was spontaneous and determined, and tightened inside. He had warm, perplexed, intense lips. He seemed to be trying to release all his unresolved feelings at once. I stood still, shocked, but then a strange feeling came over me. It seemed like everything had vanished, leaving us alone on this old dock in the lake's reflection. After a moment, I gave in to the sensation, but then I pulled away like waking up from a strange dream. This was unjustified. We must stop. Pain briefly distorted his features, but he swiftly returned to seriousness. "Why?" he asked gently. "Why are you scared?" I felt helpless and unsure how to respond. Finally, I said, "That's wrong. You're young," simply said. "You." Puzzled. He retreated. His face grew sterner. "Are you sure this is confusion?" His words were harsh, like I found something real and irrefutable. I whispered, "Andrew, we need to go home," realizing this conversation was dangerous. I turned and left the water, trying to hide my shaking hands. I heard him catch up but didn't look. I felt something other than words or actions between us while we traveled quietly. The blackness felt darker with each step, drawing us closer to something dreadful and unknown. Dusk light painted the walls orange and pink as we returned home. I felt eerie, like after a heavy sleep. Feels foggy and uneasy. Andrew went to bed, but I lazily picked through the market items in the kitchen. I struggled with remorse, anxiety, sorrow, and something else, an unexpected knock on the door. The loud knock came unexpectedly, as if someone had urgent news or a predicament. I flinched and opened it, unsure of what to expect. Ella, mother, was at the door. She looked anxious. "Mum, what happened?" I asked, growing uneasy. Ella appeared to scrutinize every line of my face. She said, "I need to talk to you," marching into the house like she owned it with Andrew besides her. I felt my entire being constrict. "Why, Andrew?" I asked gently, closing the door. She said, "I know something is going on between you two," hitting me like a gut punch. Panic rushed over me. "You mean what?" I tried to act unaware, but my voice trembled. "Don't pretend, Evelyn," she yelled. "You can't hide your expression when you gaze at each other. Tell them. Truth." Everything inside me felt upside down. Mum was always oversensitive and detail-oriented. "Mum, there is nothing between us," I said calmly, trying to be calm. "We're confused. Both of us are struggling." Ella still seemed uncertain and harsh. "Confused? Evelyn knows it's more. I heard Andrew tell you something this morning. He shows his feelings." Fear rose throughout me. "He told you what?" Asking. I tried to hide my trembling. "He didn't say anything specific," she said. His face was seen as he left. "Evelyn, he loves you, which is horrible. This must stop before things go haywire." Andrew entered the kitchen doorway then. He looked serious but calm. "What are you discussing?" he asked, his eyes roving between Ella and me. Ella confronted him and said, "Something is wrong here. This cannot continue." Andrew stiffened up, and I saw the same spark in his eyes as besides the lake. He said, "You don't understand," with a stern, disapproving voice. "I know my emotions. This is no whim." "Stop, Andrew," I intervened to take control. "Do not discuss it that way. More complicated than it seems." Ella whirled fast to face me. "Tell him to stop." "But you can't, right? Can't leave it like this. Call your father, Andrew, and let him decide." I nearly shouted. "No, Mum, don't." Felt my words linger. Unfortunately, too late. Andrew froze in the doorway. "Are you serious?" he asked gently. He spoke with concern. You will involve my father. Everything you can do? Yes, I am, Ella replied strongly. I realize you're involved and I won't allow you ruin your lives. Andrew looked at me in despair. You knew she'd do it? I tensed up when he asked. I didn't know. My anguish rose as I whispered. Inside. Andrew faced Ella. Fine, he said coldly. Get my father involved if you think it would fix anything. I'm leaving. I won't allow you to decide what's best for me. He ran towards the door without looking back. Ella, indignant and outraged, left, leaving me disappointed. Evelyn, you should have been smarter, she threw over her shoulder as the door closed. All alone in the silent, empty house, I felt the cold walls closing in. Something vital had snapped, like a tiny thread that couldn't be repaired. Whatever followed. I could no longer avoid consequences.